Hey guys, I'm talking about iron today, and this has been coming up a lot with people I've been working with. It's probably one of the things that I prescribe most to women, along with some magnesium and some good food. But I wanted to talk about iron today because there's always some women particularly seem to have this issue where they are low in iron and they're constantly low in iron, and it's been a battle for years and years and years. And this is actually what I want to address today and talk about why this can be a problem, and what you need to investigate if your iron is constantly low, if it's not just purely you're not getting enough in through your diet. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well, but this is more focusing on if you're constantly low in iron, why are you constantly low in iron, and getting to the bottom of it, because you've got to understand it's not just a matter of going, oh, I'm really low in iron, I need to supplement. Other things should really be investigated, and that's probably one of the big questions that I ask if someone has come to me and they're being low in iron for like years and years and years. I'm like, why are you low in iron? Why is this happening? Why is this an ongoing problem? And what can we do about it? So it's actually one of the biggest, it's the most common deficiency in the world. In the world, iron deficiency is really big. It's about 1 in 8 women are not consuming enough iron, so they're not getting in enough iron through their diet. And the most risk from iron deficiencies is pregnant women, women in childbearing age, so women who are menstruating, blood donors, and vegetarians. So iron's super important. It's a trace mineral. It's the main role it plays really, and it does a few things, but the big chunky role it does is it is involved in hemoglobin production in our red blood cells, which then it allows oxygen to be carried to our cells. So sort of important. It helps the transportation of oxygen. So we've got to have iron to be able to get oxygen to our cells, and if we don't have enough iron, of course we feel fatigued. So some of the deficiency signs with iron is nails, like brittle nails, or your nails having ridges, or if you've had an iron deficiency for a long time, some people's nails will cave in, so they'll go in rather than being curved on top, they cave in. Pale nail beds, brittle hair. You can have digestive issues, you can have thyroid issues, because iron is also involved in thyroid production of hormones, things like fatigue, hot and cold, hair loss, dry brittle skin, nails, feeling cold all the time, like cold hands and feet. Heavy periods can also be an issue, and one of the drivers of low iron, and that is often one of the reasons. Low energy, dizziness, shortness of breath, and also involved in cognitive development, so not being able to think clearly, as well as cognitive development in an unborn baby and a child. So it's about 2/3 of our iron is used in hemoglobin, and it carries in the carrying of oxygen to the cells. And so the requirements in pregnancy, this is one thing I see a lot with people. I want to know if you're pregnant or you're trying to fall pregnant, I want to make sure that you want to make sure that your iron is really good levels before you fall pregnant and throughout the pregnancy, because your iron usage actually dramatically increases in the 2nd and 3rd trimester. And so it's really, really important to make sure your levels are right, because it reduces the risk of premature birth, low birth weight, and they're pretty two big things actually. So we've got to get it right, and too many women, their iron the uses increase throughout the pregnancy, and then they will feel exhausted and have to get an iron infusion in the 3rd trimester, and that's not really ideal either. It's not that good for you getting an infusion and getting that level of iron in one go. So when we're looking at iron, if you ever go to the doctor and get your iron test, you want to be looking, the first thing I will always look at is ferritin. Now ferritin is the most accurate level of measure of iron. It's more complicated than that, but think of it like houses. So ferritin is the houses, the people is how many people are in the houses. And then we have transferrin, which is the transport to the houses, so think of the buses. And then the saturation is how many people are on the buses. So if you're looking at your blood test going, I don't know. But the main thing I will always look for is, the first thing I look for is going, what's ferritin levels? And if ferritin is, below 40, I'm going to probably supplement, because it needs to be, optimal levels is somewhere between it's 50 and 150. It's a very wide range, but that also leads me to my next point, is that not everyone's normal is the same, particularly with iron, and you've got to look at your history. And so if it has dropped dramatically quickly, it's like, why has this happened? You've got to look into it. And often what I see is it gets missed, or it gets ignored, or it doesn't get addressed until it's really, really low, and people are feeling really, really horrible, and there's a lot of consequences of that, but for it not being picked up quicker. So you want enough, but you also don't want too much, because too much have consequences too. If you have too much iron, it can be it's a genetic condition known as hemochromatosis, or it's family connected. And that's not ideal either, because that can cause a lot of damage. It can cause damage to the cells. So there's this balance of having enough and not having too much. And when we're talking about food and getting iron in through food, there's 2 different types of iron. There's the iron that's in plants, and there's the iron that is in animals, but there's a bit of both actually in animals and animal products, right? So there's heme iron and there's non-heme iron. Heme iron is actually absorbed at a higher rate, much higher rate than non-heme iron, which is why a lot of, if you are low in iron, it's a lot easier to increase if you are having some form of animal product. And if you are low in iron and you're vegetarian or vegan, you need to be supplementing, because you might not be, it comes back to an absorption thing. So with non-heme iron, the absorption is about 2 to 20%. So this then also comes down to how you are absorbing it and what the efficiency of your digestion is. The bioavailability of iron in a vegetarian diet is about 5 to 10%. So meaning that it's not all available, and that comes back to the same. I'm not saying, by the way guys, I'm not saying eat meat, I'm not saying don't. Depending on what your way is, you've got to really make sure you're absorbing your food properly. So this is, and that's just something to keep in note. And a lot of women do find that it is easier to go, and when they feel really are craving it, or their iron is getting really low, they will crave red meat, because they feel like they need that extra boost, which makes sense, because you're going to get it in faster. So the question that is really the $1 million question is, why you're always low in iron. Is it absorption? So are you absorbing your food properly? And if you're low in iron and it's not because of an absorption thing, it's potentially you're also low in a lot of other things and you're not absorbing it because you're not breaking your food down and absorbing it. Is it intake? So is it lack of iron in your diet? Those two often will go together. And sometimes a lot of people will move towards, I've heard this before, they'll move towards a vegetarian diet because they feel lighter and they feel better and they have more energy, which is totally true, because you eat away a lot of the time. People will then move from eating junk or more refined carbohydrates to plants, and then they're eating, their vegetable intake is increasing. It's not necessarily moving away from the meat, and it's not necessarily the meat that is the problem. It's how you're breaking it down, and sometimes it could be you're not breaking it down properly, and eating something lighter to digest is actually gentler on you and it feels better. So that's something to consider, and that's something I'm always looking at. I'm like, is it because you're not absorbing it? Or is it just, or is it actually also because you're just genuinely eating more vegetables? And when we're having this discussion, it's also going, okay, well, what's right for you, and what take do you want to do? Where are you coming from with this? And what's the best way to approach this based on your view of the world and where you're at? And are you coming from it? Are you being vegetarian for ethical reasons, or are you being because it feels better, or what's the reason? And you're like, oh well, when I eat meat, it's really hard, I feel really heavy. It's like, okay, well, let's look at your digestion, and maybe can we keep the plants and all the extra vegetables, and if you want to bring something in that is animal based, make sure that it's really ethical and sustainable, and quality is better than quantity, in my opinion. But are you then absorbing it? So you can go both ways with this. I don't have judgment for people either way. I've been both vegetarian. I'm not vegetarian anymore. I eat a very paleo type diet. But for the most part, that's what I've observed, right, when I'm working with people. So intake. The other thing then is heavy periods and blood loss. So people with fibroids, really heavy periods. Fibroids is one of the biggest things with heavy periods, and having a fibroid, which is a growth, it will then they bleed, and then there's a lot more blood loss than there would be for the person with an average flow of blood, and so then they lose a lot of iron. It's also could be heavy and long. And so that needs to be addressed, not just giving iron. It's like, what can we do to actually address that? The other thing that needs to be checked, if you're going on with if you're constantly dealing with low iron, is also checking for, there's a bacteria that lives in your stomach called Helicobacter pylori, and it can have a bit of a party, but it can actually reduce the amount of absorption, the way you can absorb iron. And so sometimes if someone's had that for a long time, investigating that and looking at that and going, is that one of the reasons why we're low in iron? The other reason is being celiac. So if you're celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disease and reaction to gluten, that will stop you from absorbing iron. And if it's undiagnosed, particularly if you're still consuming gluten. So they're two big ones that I always test for if someone's low in iron. There's other reasons like increased destruction of red blood cells and stuff like that, but and the big one that often gets missed, and I've done a lot more learning about it recently, is high copper, and how copper can actually block the absorption of iron. And a lot of women with hormonal or heavy period issues will have high copper. There's when the liver is working hard and it's not as well supported as it could be, and there's deficiencies going on, often it will use up all the nutrients, and copper will be sort of almost like a byproduct of this metabolism for the liver to keep ticking over, and there'll be high copper in the blood, and that will then bind and stop iron absorption. So looking at copper, and I look at copper and zinc. So copper's a big one, particularly with women who have a copper IUD. They might have gone and got an IUD for different, whatever reason that is, whether it be contraception or issues with their cycle. But having copper can also really impact women. Copper toxicity is a real problem, basically. And one of the big problems is it will block a lot of nutrients. It's like an anti-nutrient if it's in excess. So addressing that, I always measure copper to zinc. Someone calling me. The other thing to know is that there's also, like, to make red blood cells, there's a lot of other cofactors. And so if we're deficient in other things, we can be, it can cause us to be anemic. things like vitamin A, folate, which is B9, B6, B12, and even copper deficiency can impact it. So making sure that we're testing all these other cofactors as well, and going, okay, what's the big picture? Is everything nice and balanced at the moment, and where do we need to create balance, because we're not going to be able to make enough red blood cells if we're deficient in a lot of B vitamins and vitamin A. Yeah. So there's quite a few things as well when we're talking about diet that can decrease absorption. Soy protein and casein protein, so the protein in dairy, can cause absorption issues. Other factors that can inhibit absorption are things called tannins. So this is like a particular type of phytonutrient that's in things like coffee, tea, wine, grapes, cranberries, strawberries, blueberries, apples, apricots, barley, peaches, dried fruits, mint, basil, rosemary. The main contenders in that group of tannins is tea, coffee, wine, grapes. So if you're eating meat, don't have coffee and tea with it. If you have an iron issue, being conscious of eating foods that are high in vitamin C for absorption. But a lot of those things will also inhibit absorption too. Phytates can inhibit absorption. So these are things in grains such as whole wheat, oats, and rice. I get everyone off wheat, so like for many reasons, that being one of them. Legumes can also inhibit absorption, so black beans, pinto beans, kidney beans, soybeans, I said so before, peanuts and lentils. Nuts and seeds, walnuts, pine nuts, almonds, sesame seeds, and then tubers like potatoes, turnips, beets, and carrots. So there's quite a lot of things. I think the tannins is the main one, and phytates with the grains like wheat and oats is a big one too. If you're going to start with the coffee and the tea, right? And supplementation is really important. And what I also hear a lot when people come to me is they've gone and got a supplement from the chemist. It makes them constipated. They find it really affects them. And it's to do with the type of iron. I use an iron called an iron bisglycinate, which is, and it's got cofactors with it. So it's got some folate and some B12, vitamin C for absorption. And that is a really good iron that I use that doesn't make people constipated, but there are different types of forms of iron that can make people constipated, and generally the ones that get put on from the chemist or from the doctor are the ones that will make people constipated. The other thing that's really important is lactoferrin. That can be helpful is there's this protein called lactoferrin, and it's an iron-binding protein, and it increases absorption in the small intestine, and you can get that in supplemental form and actually take that as well. So the point of this share is really to help you understand. It's like if you are one of those women that's constantly, if you're feeling exhausted and you don't know why, first of all, you need to go get your iron checked. But second of all, if it's really a concern and it's something you're always struggling with, you need to do further investigation into why it's high, not just why it's low. Why it's low. So, and just figure it out. Like, try and work on your digestion, work on your absorption, look at your diet. Are you getting enough in? And then rule out celiac, rule out H. pylori. Go and get your copper tested, copper levels, and your zinc and your copper levels tested. Support your gut, and if you can start to rule things out, then at least it's a process of elimination of understanding why you're so low and why is it always an issue, right? That is all. I hope you found that helpful. If you've got any questions, please comment below, and I'll see you soon. I'll see you